The scream that woke me up did not sound human, and that alone was enough to send me running out of bed with my heart slamming against my ribs before my brain had even caught up with my legs. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen counter and burst out the back door into the cold night air, my bare feet hitting the wet grass of my farm. The sound came again, sharp and broken, from somewhere near the old grain silo at the edge of my property. I did not think about danger. I did not think about what could be waiting out there in the dark. I just ran toward the sound, because that is what you do when something is hurting and calling out for help. When my flashlight beam finally landed on her, I froze for half a second, and in that half a second, my mind tried to reject what my eyes were seeing. A girl, small and thin, with skin the color of wet silver, was pressed against the base of the silo, clutching her arm. Her fingers had too many joints. Her eyes, wide and glassy with pain, caught the light and reflected it back like a cat caught in headlights. She was not human. She was something else entirely, and she was hurt, and she was terrified. I dropped to my knees a few feet away from her, keeping my hands open and visible, the way you would approach a frightened animal that could bolt or bite at any moment. "Hey," I said softly, even though I had no idea if she understood a single word coming out of my mouth. "I am not going to hurt you. I promise." She flinched at the sound of my voice, pressing herself harder against the cold metal of the silo, and that was when I noticed the wound. Her forearm had a long burn across it, angry and raw, the kind of injury that comes from something far more advanced than a kitchen accident or a fall. Whatever had happened to her, it had happened fast, and it had happened violently enough to leave a mark like that. In the distance, beyond the tree line that bordered my land, I saw a flicker of light sweep across the sky, low and searching, like a beam looking for something it had lost. My stomach dropped. Whatever this girl was running from, it was still out there, and it was still looking. I made a decision in that moment that I have never once regretted, even though it would have been so much easier and so much safer to walk away and pretend I had never seen her at all. "Come on," I whispered, holding out my hand slowly. "We need to move, now." She looked at my hand, then at my face, and something in her eyes shifted from pure terror to something closer to desperate trust. She reached out with her strange, long fingers and let me help her up. The moment her weight settled onto her feet, she stumbled, and I caught her before she could fall, wrapping my arm around her thin shoulders and half carrying her back toward the house as fast as I could manage. Behind us, the light in the sky grew brighter for a moment, sweeping closer, and my pulse hammered in my ears as I pushed open my back door and pulled her inside, slamming it shut and killing every light in the house within seconds. We stood together in the dark kitchen, both of us breathing hard, listening to the silence outside, waiting to see if whatever was searching had noticed us at all. Long minutes passed. The light in the sky faded and did not return. Whatever had been hunting her had moved on, at least for now. I finally let out the breath I had been holding and turned to look at her properly in the dim glow of the stove light I had switched on low. Up close, despite how alien she looked, there was something achingly familiar in her expression. She looked like any frightened child anywhere in the world, lost and far from home, and unsure if the person helping her could be trusted. "You are safe here," I told her, even though I had no real way to promise that. "Let me look at your arm." She did not resist when I gently guided her to sit at my kitchen table. I cleaned the burn as best I could with what I had in my first aid kit, and though she winced and made a soft clicking sound with her fingers, she did not pull away. By the time I finished wrapping the wound, the tension in her shoulders had eased just slightly, and for the first time since I had found her, she looked less like a cornered animal and more like a tired child who had simply run out of places to hide. I gave her a warm blanket and one of my old shirts to change into, since her strange, torn clothing looked like it had been through some kind of disaster. She ate slowly when I offered her food, watching me the entire time as if expecting me to snatch the plate away at any moment. I sat across from her and ate my own food just as slowly, hoping that if she saw me eating calmly, she might believe that this was not a trap. She did not speak, not in any language I understood, but by the end of that first night, she had stopped flinching every time I moved. I named her Junebug, mostly because of the way she clicked her fingers together whenever she was nervous, a rapid little rhythm that reminded me of the insects that used to swarm my porch light back when I was a kid. She seemed to like the sound of the name, or maybe she just liked that I said it gently, because after that first night, she would look up whenever I called it. The next few days were quiet, but never boring. I kept her hidden inside the house, worried that whoever had hurt her might still be searching the area. Every time a car passed on the distant road, every time a shadow moved across the yard, my whole body went rigid, ready to hide her in the storm cellar if I needed to. She noticed my tension and seemed to share it, often standing perfectly still near the window, watching the sky with an intensity that told me she understood the danger far better than I did. On the second night, my nerves were tested in the worst possible way. I heard the low hum of an engine approaching from the main road, slow and deliberate, the kind of sound that makes your skin crawl, because it sounds like it is searching rather than passing through. I grabbed Junebug by the hand and pulled her toward the cellar door without a single word needed between us. She understood immediately and moved fast, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. We crouched together in the darkness of the cellar, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain it could be heard outside. Through the small vent near the ceiling, I could see flashes of light sweeping across my yard, methodical and patient, moving from the barn to the fence line to the edge of the trees. Whoever or whatever was out there was thorough. They were not giving up easily. Junebug pressed close against my side, her small hand gripping my sleeve so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. I put my arm around her without thinking, the same way I would have comforted any scared child, and she buried her face against my shoulder, her whole body trembling. The light lingered outside for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes. Then, slowly, the hum of the engine faded into the distance, and the light finally vanished from the vent above us. We stayed in that cellar for almost an hour longer, neither of us willing to risk moving too soon. When we finally climbed back upstairs, exhausted and shaking, Junebug looked at me with an expression that needed no translation. She was grateful, and she was scared, and she trusted me more than she had the night before. Over the following days, something changed between us. She began to relax in small ways, exploring the house with careful curiosity, examining objects like the toaster or the ceiling fan with wide, fascinated eyes. I taught her a simple card game one evening, using an old deck of cards I found in a drawer, and within an hour, she was somehow beating me every single round, her quick mind picking up patterns faster than I could track them myself. I laughed more in those few days than I had in months, and despite the danger hanging over us, there was a strange kind of peace in those quiet evenings. She still did not speak in words I understood, but she communicated in other ways. She hummed sometimes, low, layered tones that seemed to come from deep in her chest, and though I could not understand the meaning, I could feel the emotion behind it. Some nights the humming sounded peaceful, almost content. Other nights it sounded like longing, like grief, like a song for something far away that she desperately missed. On the third night, everything changed again, and this time there was no warning at all. I was sitting on the porch, unable to sleep, staring out at the dark fields, when the sky above my property suddenly lit up with a brightness that turned night into something close to day. I jumped to my feet, my heart slamming against my chest as a massive shape descended silently over my north pasture, far larger than anything I had ever imagined possible. It was not the searching light from before. This was something else entirely, something enormous and deliberate, and it was landing right on my land. Junebug appeared at the door behind me, and instead of fear, her face lit up with something I had not seen from her before, pure and desperate hope. Before I could stop her, she bolted past me and ran across the yard toward the descending ship, her bare feet flying over the grass, calling out in a language of clicks and tones that echoed across the field. My instincts screamed at me to grab her and run the other way, but something about the way she moved, the way her whole body radiated relief instead of terror, made me hesitate. I grabbed my shotgun from beside the door out of pure habit, the same way any farmer would when something massive and unknown lands on his property in the middle of the night, but I did not raise it. I simply held it low and followed her across the field, my legs shaking with every step. The ship settled onto the ground with barely a sound, sleek and dark, and a section of its side slid open smoothly, revealing a ramp that lowered onto the grass. A figure stepped out, taller than Junebug by nearly 2 feet, with the same silver skin and long jointed fingers. But where Junebug's eyes held uncertainty, this figure's eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the field with the kind of focus that told me instantly this was someone used to making difficult decisions. Junebug reached her a moment later and threw herself forward, and the taller figure dropped to her knees instantly, wrapping her arms around the girl with a desperation that needed no translation at all. It was the universal language of a parent who thought they had lost their child, and had somehow, against all odds, gotten her back. I stood a few feet away, my shotgun still lowered, watching the reunion with a strange lump forming in my throat. After a long moment, the taller figure lifted her head and looked directly at me, and her expression shifted from relief to something far more calculating, far more intense. She said something in that same clicking language, low and firm, and to my complete shock, the old smartwatch on my wrist, one I had almost forgotten I owned, crackled to life and began translating her words with a slight delay, the mechanical voice stumbling slightly over the syntax but making the meaning clear enough. "You are the one who helped her," the translated voice said. "You fed her. You protected her. You did not turn her over to those who were hunting her." I swallowed hard, gripping the shotgun a little tighter without meaning to. "She was scared and hurt," I said simply. "I was not going to just leave her out there." The woman studied me for a long moment, her sharp eyes moving over my face, as if she were reading every detail of my life in the lines of my expression. Junebug stayed pressed against her side, watching me with the same hopeful look she had given me that very first night in my kitchen. "My name is Ellen," the translated voice said, though something told me that was not her real name at all, but rather the closest translation my device could manage. "I lead a group of refugees, 11,000 of my people, spread across 40 ships, searching for a place to call home after losing everything we once had." My mind struggled to process the scale of what she was saying. 11,000 people, 40 ships. All of them searching, all of them running from something that had already left a burn mark on a child's arm and sent searchlights sweeping across my land in the dead of night. "The people hunting her," I said slowly, "were they hunting all of you?" Ellen's expression darkened, and for a moment, the sharpness in her eyes turned into something closer to old, deep exhaustion. "Yes," she said, "we have been hunted for a very long time. My daughter's ship became separated during an attack days ago, and she crash-landed here, alone and afraid, while I searched every corner of this world trying to find her." I glanced down at Junebug, who was still watching me with wide, grateful eyes, and something inside my chest tightened painfully at the thought of what she must have gone through before I found her behind that silo. "I came to this farm tonight for 2 reasons, Ellen continued, her translated voice steady despite the emotion clearly written across her face. "The first was to find my daughter. The second was to meet the person who protected her when they had no reason to." "Anyone would have done the same," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew that was not entirely true. Not everyone would have risked hiding a stranger, alien or otherwise, from whatever forces had been sweeping searchlights across the countryside. Ellen shook her head slowly. "That is not true, and we both know it. Many would have turned her in, or worse, out of fear. You did not. That tells me something important about you, and perhaps about your entire species." She rose to her feet then, keeping one hand resting gently on Junebug's shoulder, and looked out across my dark fields toward the horizon, where the first hints of dawn were beginning to creep into the sky. "My people need a place to rebuild," she said. "A place with water, with soil that can grow food, with space enough for those who have nowhere else left to go. We have technology and knowledge that could benefit your world greatly in exchange for shelter and a promise of peace." I stared at her, my mind spinning at the sheer weight of what she was suggesting. "You want to negotiate with me? I am just a farmer. I do not have the power to make decisions like that." "No," Ellen agreed, "but you are the first human I have met since arriving on this world who showed kindness without expecting anything in return. Before I approach anyone with authority over this planet, I needed to understand what kind of species I would be asking my people to live beside. I needed to see it for myself, not through reports or recordings, but through a real moment of choice." She looked down at Junebug, who reached up and took her mother's hand, then looked back at me with something like quiet hope in her sharp eyes. "You passed that test the moment you carried my daughter into your home instead of turning away," she said. For a long moment, none of us said anything. The wind moved gently through the tall grass of my north pasture, and somewhere behind Ellen, I could see other shapes beginning to descend from the sky in the far distance. More ships, smaller ones, hovering just above the horizon, like they were waiting for a signal. "What happens now?" I finally asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Ellen's expression softened slightly, and for the first time since she had stepped off her ship, something like a smile touched the edges of her face, alien, but unmistakably warm. "Now," she said, "I would like to speak with those who lead your people, with you standing beside me, if you are willing, not as a farmer stumbling into history by accident, but as the reason any of this conversation is even possible." I looked down at Junebug, who was smiling now too, her clicking fingers moving in that same rapid rhythm I had first noticed the night I found her. Except this time, it did not sound scared at all. It sounded almost like laughter. I thought about my quiet life on this farm, the long days of routine and solitude, and how none of that had prepared me in any way for standing in a field at dawn holding a shotgun I no longer felt the need to raise, facing a woman who led thousands of people searching for nothing more than a place to call home. "Yeah," I said finally, setting the shotgun down gently in the grass beside me. "I am willing." Ellen nodded once, and behind her, the horizon continued to fill with the quiet arrival of ships that carried not an invasion, but a request, and possibly, if things went well, the beginning of something neither species had ever experienced before. As the first light of morning spread across my fields, I realized that everything about my life had changed the moment I chose to help a frightened, injured girl, instead of walking away. And whatever came next, whatever conversations, whatever decisions had to be made, I knew I would face them the same way I had faced that first night behind the silo, with open hands and a steady heart. Junebug let go of her mother's hand and ran over to me one last time, wrapping her thin arms around my waist in a brief, tight hug, before stepping back with a bright, grateful expression that needed no translation at all. Whatever happened next, I understood that this moment, standing in a quiet field at dawn, would mark the beginning of a story far bigger than myself, and far bigger than one small farm at the edge of nowhere.